Hello, and welcome back to the Out of Program podcast. Today we're joined by Dr. James Somauroo, a former anaesthetist who has gone on to become a leading voice in HealthTech. He was previously a director of the Digital Health London Accelerator and is now the co-founder and CEO of SomX, a creative communication agency for HealthTech and biotech companies. James also hosts HealthTech podcast and is editor-in-chief of HealthTech Pigeon. Hi, James, and welcome to the show.
Hello, Jing. How are you, sir?
Doing great.
Me too. Delighted to be here. Thanks for having me on.
It's great to have you on the show. So let's dive in and start right from the beginning. What initially drew you to medicine, and how were those early years?
Yeah, so for me, I wasn't ever actually drawn to medicine, which is quite an interesting way to answer the question. But I think this is probably relatable to quite a lot of people, that I had an immigrant father. So my dad was born in Mauritius. He got a boat over to England when he was 18, saved up all his money. It took him 3 weeks to get here. He had a place at nursing school and nothing else. And he rose the ranks through nursing. And, being a black male nurse in the 70s can't have been easy. But did very well and sort of went into management on that side and became a chief nursing officer and that side of things. But he grew up in a world where the consultant on the wards was a pillar of society, was wealthy, was loved and heralded by everybody, free haircuts in the community and like all this sort of stuff it's true, all this sort of stuff that happened. And I think he wanted that for his son. He played nothing but risk in his life to create what we have now and the world that I grew up in the UK. And so he played defense for me, which was to kind of place the idea of you'll be a doctor into me. So I never have a point in my life really where I can point to it, where I think, oh, that's where I chose to be a doctor. That's where I was drawn to medicine, in your words. I don't have that in my story. What I have is just this ever persistent, that's what I'm going to do. And that's not to say I loved it. It's not to say that I didn't like it, but it was somewhere in the middle for me at all times, that it was just the thing that I did and the thing that I was doing. And I, medical school and university, I love medical school. I went to Nottingham. It was great. It's a 5-year party with a few exams at the end, basically. At Nottingham, where it certainly was at the time, and we all absolutely loved it. So it wasn't really the best place or time for me to be thinking I wanted to do anything differently, because it was just, really just enjoying yourself. And I did like science and I liked people. Those two things were true. So you sort of got through it. The molecular biology and the anatomy particularly, probably not so much. So that was less enjoyable. But at the same time, just got through medical school and just sort of became a doctor. And it was only really at that point that I started to think, well, my skills are less so around the treating of patients. It's more fixing the system, which is what I became drawn to. So that's where I started to feel the draw of, hold on a minute, why are we doing this and not this? Hold on a minute, why are we all just using this one printer out of 30 in the hospital that works? Why don't we just fix the other 29 rather than have a queue out the window and every ward round starts late? So all these things were the initial things for me that drew me into healthcare, of the sort of addiction of fixing a problem in the system and then disproportionate results from that compound. That became a massive draw for me. But yeah, a very long-winded way of answering the question, but nothing drew me.
I think you articulate it really well, because I think a lot of clinicians today come from immigrant backgrounds where their parents impress upon them these desires to see them succeed in life. And it's a projection, of course, from their own experiences moving to a country at a point in time when, being a doctor was viewed as, hugely respected. And whilst my parents were academics, they also saw that as well.
Interesting. Yeah, it's true, man. Well, listen, I'm a parent now too. And we do our best. We're just trying to do our best. And everyone's parents probably, for the most part, just try to do their best. And we'll all swing the pendulum too much in the wrong direction. little Levi is going to have far too much freedom. Probably he's going to not be pushed into any career, and he's probably just going to swan around and, I don't know, open up a little fishing tackle shop in the Bahamas and sort of something. Like, he'll probably just do something like that. Who knows? But the point is, yeah, I think we all try our best as parents, and we can all, I think, feel hard done by, and I certainly did at certain points. And I know people that feel that way. I know relatives actually that feel that way, that they got pushed into this thing and Well, at some point, you can take some personal responsibility that you can change your path. I think as well, just a little bit of grace that you give to your parents that put you in that position. It's not the worst position in the world, and it's certainly one where you can springboard into other things. And I think that's particularly how the world has changed. A medical degree is not a life sentence like it perhaps once was. And by that, I mean a life sentence, of course, into a job in medicine as being a doctor. It's not as simple as that now. There are non-clinical specialties. There are other ways you can use your degree. And those paths, whilst not completely well trodden, they are trodden far more than they were even 5, even 10 years ago, 15 years ago, certainly. So, when I graduated medical school, I started medical school 20 years ago. So, the world has changed a lot since then. And so you can do a medical degree and you can take a level of personal autonomy and risk after that if you do feel that way. But yeah, I do always think it's useful for me to explain that, because I think whilst it's easy to spin a yarn about how impressive it is to leave medicine, all the rest of it, but people do end up in these situations in a career or a life they don't like, and you have to dig deep and on some level take some risk. Medicine is a wonderful career. If you're not comfortable taking risk on that career, you can just tick the boxes and get to the next stage, and it's lovely for that. It's not lovely for a lot of things, of course, but it is lovely for that. And I think the real world is full of these idiosyncrasies and areas where you have to take risk in order to get to the next thing, and it's a bit more messy, and so that's not comfortable for a lot of people. But that's what you have to start engaging in if you are looking for an opportunity outside of it. So yeah.
So on that theme, for you mentioned you'd experienced numerous frustrations whilst you were a doctor, and you wanted to change the system. So was that why you then pivoted into a leadership role through the National Medical Directors Program?
Yeah, so that was called the Bruce Keough Fellowship at the time. And yeah, I essentially had done I'd done core anaesthetics training, and I was looking at leaving medicine at that point, and I was looking at startups I could apply to at the time. I was looking for little roles here and there, and that's because I'd done a lot of quality improvement projects. I'd spoken to tech companies as the solution to a lot of those quality improvement projects, and so I was putting the feelers out for lots of different things. The reason I went to that fellowship, first of all, luck, because it's a lot of people that applied to that fellowship, particularly in the years that I did it, and people looking for a fellowship as a 1 foot in and 1 foot out of medicine. It's a really nice way to start exploring that stuff. So definitely in part luck, but it was that 1 foot in, 1 foot out that I really liked, because I could explore the 9 to 5 at where I ended up, which was Health Education England. But that fellowship puts different fellows, about 30 fellows per year it was at the time, that they would go to the CQC, they'd go to NICE, they'd go to NHS England, they'd go to Department of Health, they'd go to this, that, the other. So each fellow would be in a different place. I ended up at Health Education England with a guy called Maz, and yeah, we experienced that 9 to 5 of healthcare. First of all, we also learnt policy, and we learnt what policy levers are and how policy actually contributes to the adoption of technology. Because if you change policy in a certain area, then a lot of organizations have to do a thing. And if that thing is closer towards adopting technology, it can get you there. So we learned a lot about that. We learned about how to, all these reports that come out, the 10-year plan, the this, the that. We learned how those get written. We learned why recommendations are written in a certain way, how other organizations then have to respond. And we sort of learned that back end of healthcare and how things changed. And I think that was a really interesting perspective, when up until then, I saw the front end of healthcare, and I had that really irritating naivety about me, which was like, why can't things change? Why don't they just do this? Why don't they just do that? The sort of like the pub political conversation is sort of like where I was at that point of like, they should just do this, they should just do that. Whereas actually when you go in and learn it, you have a great deal of respect for how that stuff actually moves in a way that doesn't destabilize everything, keeps things safe and progresses things. And it's really interesting actually, because just on that point, I had some friends come to stay at the weekend from Nottingham, where I went to medical school actually. GP and a colorectal surgeon, now consultants, which is just bizarre thinking about my friends as consultants. Yeah. But she was saying that my friend is a GP. She was saying that with their new GP contracts, they have to be seen to be looking into AI. And just that simple step, they are looking into AI, and they've brought some AI in, the scribes, they're looking at triage, they're looking at all these things. And it's like, I can plot that. I can see how all these things happen, which is really nice. It starts as this type of document, then it becomes this, then it becomes a recommendation, then it goes into this, and then it becomes part of the contract. So it was really nice to see how innovation happened from that perspective, because that was my interest, basically, the innovation side and actually seeing things change.
And on the subject of innovation then, you, if I recall, you spent a bit of time under Professor Tony Young, right? How was that experience? Because he, of course, went on to found the Clinician Entrepreneur Program, which I think many of the audience will be quite familiar with. What was kind of your contribution to that, and how did you kind of support him?
Yeah. No, thanks for bringing that up, because I don't actually talk about this a lot at all, but it was really nice. I was at the Digital Health London Accelerator, and I started off as a navigator, by the way, which is like an account manager. So I was helping out a few startups with their market access to the NHS, which is what that is and what that does. It helps certain startups get into the NHS, basically. So I was doing that, and it was so funny. I just bumped into Tony Young. I was in Shoreditch at the time, and just bumped into Tony Young, who was out with a few other like clinical entrepreneur type people. It was before the program, but ended up just chatting, getting on really well. He saw something in me at the time, and he gave me the time of day. Like, he met with me a couple of times, and we talked about my frustrations as someone that was trying to innovate, and he could see that I was very green at that time. Like, I needed rounding off. And he was that for me. It was really kind of him, to actually put the time into me as someone that he thought could actually either go and do something, or just to help me and myself, really. Like, he was great for that. And he then offered me the chance to work with him a couple of days. I can't remember, like a day a week or a couple of days a month, or like something along those lines, a certain number of hours a month. And we just got that deal done, basically, with the accelerator, that they would sort of second me to NHS England, even though it wasn't as official as that, if you know what I mean. But I would just be spending time with him, doing a few things. And he was setting up the clinical entrepreneur program at the time, and he was going round to people like the Royal College of GPs and surgeons and that kind of thing, and he was pitching it and asking for their contribution as to what they would do. And so I was learning loads about, again, how you would set a program like that up, and helping him with bits and bobs here or there. I certainly don't want to overplay my role here, but like, just helping him out, bits of research and things that, I thought would work, and that kind of thing, just contributing a bit of opinion from where I sat in the ecosystem, basically. But yeah, I technically left medicine at that point because I was part of the accelerator, so I wasn't actually practicing clinically. And it was just after I'd rescinded my license, because I'd made the decision that this is where I actually want my career to go. I want my career to be outside of medicine now, because I've had a taste of it in the fellowship, I've had a taste with it in the accelerator, and this is definitely where I want to spend my time. So I'd rescinded my license. So whilst I helped Tony set it up in a very small way, I couldn't actually join it, because I wasn't actually a clinical entrepreneur, which is quite funny. But yeah, it was a really interesting time, and it started to show me that messiness of the world actually outside of medicine a lot, and how you get things done is not, there was no application. I just bumped into them in Shoreditch. There was no I ended up just having a conversation. We then met a few times. He saw something in me. It was very personal, actually. It felt very personal, the relationship that we had. It was really nice. And because of that, I then got this opportunity, and it started to show me that, oh, hold on a minute, like not everything has an application form and boxes to tick. Actually, it is this messy, risk-taking side of the world that can bring these opportunities and create roles and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, that's a brief history of that part.
Yeah, and I think that's a great story, because so much of the opportunities come about through serendipity. But of course, you need to engineer your luck and then take them when they present, which is clearly the case. And being there early really helped, because, you got the, by being early, you got the bulk of the experience. And by the time it was, this program was established, then it probably gets a bit diluted for the people who come in the latter years. But sounded very formative at that point.
It was great. It was a great time, actually. I think in the whole health tech innovation development of all of this stuff, because it felt that we didn't have many programs. You didn't have things like Byte Labs. You didn't have things like the Google events that we do with SomX. Like, you didn't have any of this stuff. So it felt like anything through the door was the beginning of people like me finding their people. I think it's much easier now to, although still not a walk in the park, but I think it's much easier to find community as a frustrated clinician that wants to innovate. I think there are places for that now. And that was the time where all of them were being set up. That's the time where the clinical entrepreneur program gave so many people back then a bit of a home, and definitely a community of people to talk to that shared a similar frustration. I remember one of their events that I snuck into, probably, or probably got kindly invited to. It was at Balderton Capital, and I haven't thought about this in years, but I can just remember Vishal Gulati, I think, was there, the VC. I think it was Vishal, but I think it was him that just gave this presentation on venture capital, and so many people in the room had little startups that they were looking to get funding for and all that kind of thing. This was in the very early days of Babylon, which seemed to be the only kind of health tech company that people would know and talk about. And so there was a lot of inspiration. There was a lot of, we believe we can do anything. There was a lot of hope and optimism. And I was listening to this talk from Balderton, and it was just all this MBA business language, but just so logical, and it all just made sense. And this was the beginnings of me learning about that side of the world and thinking, like, hold on a minute, there's what the healthcare world doesn't have any of this knowledge. Like, if we can in part be this bridge to this knowledge, this is amazing. And that got me thinking about the accelerator, and then what do I do next? And is there a fund there for health tech startups in the UK? And that talk, actually, not that I've ever actually put those dots together, but I think that talk was one of the first, seeds of that.
Wow, I'm glad with this podcast we can spark some reminiscence and connect some dots.
Nice, yeah, really nice.
But I want to take a step back then, because I didn't realize that you'd started working with Tony when you were already part of Digital Health London Accelerator. But I want to focus a bit on how that opportunity came about, because you mentioned you started off as navigator and then you rose the ranks to become the director. Could you walk me through what that looked like? How did that all come about?
So it came about... Again, to your point around serendipity, I think, people talk about increasing the surface area for luck all the time. I don't know if you play cricket, but if people do play cricket, you'll hear the line, if bowling line and length in a test match, which lasts 5 days, you just want to bowl line and length because eventually you'll get a wicket, that kind of thing. If you just do the right things over and over and over and again, like, you've just increased the surface area for luck. So as part of being on the fellowship and looking for that opportunity, I was in a WhatsApp group with all the fellows, and I can remember Manpreet, one of the fellows, just put the Digital Health London job into the WhatsApp chat and just said, this is probably relevant for one of us. And I just jumped on it and was like, yeah, that looks absolutely ideal. And I was applying for, as I said, a few different things at the time. There was Babylon that I threw an application in for, ended up interviewing with Mo Basher, the chief medical officer there. There was one called Zava Health at the time. which is a business model that would look so much more comfortable now than when it did back then. They were super early into the kind of online pharmacy delivery consultations. Like, they were super early into that. That was really interesting. So I was interviewing a lot of different places, and that Digital Health London job felt like the one-to-many model rather than the one-to-one. So rather than backing one horse in the race, i.e. going to one startup, doing one technology in one clinical area, that felt more like, oh, I can support a group of startups to do a group of different things to make the NHS better broadly, and I get to learn about that style of company and business in that services layer. So it's that old adage of, in the gold rush, do you want to be digging for gold or do you want to sell the shovels? That was the choice I had. I can dig for gold and apply, I could go somewhere like Babylon or a different startup at the time, or I can sell the shovels, which is not as sexy. It's not as big exit. It's not any of that kind of moonshot stuff. But it is useful and it is safer, in inverted commas, because you haven't got a horse in the race. You're the ones that own the race or manage the race, or you're managing whoever the top 10 horses are. You're just looking after them. So it doesn't matter who the horses are. So it was all of that, it felt safer to me. And I think, on the spectrum of entrepreneurship, I'm probably quite risk averse in comparison to entrepreneurs. I think in a spectrum of doctors, I'm probably risk taking. But then if you zoom in on the risk takers, I'm at the more risk averse end of the risk takers, I would say. So entrepreneurship opportunities that carry less risk are for me. And that's probably the best I can explain it. So where I saw opportunity to learn the service layer, if it made loads of sense to me. It just made loads of sense. And frankly, I've always in my career optimized for optionality. So I've never put it all on black or put it all on number 32. Like, I've never done that. I've always played for what gives me the most options. And then it became obvious that Digital Health London job just gave me the most options. And so that was the decision making that got me there. And that's not to say, by the way, that I just had 1,000 startup offers and loads of places to go. It may or may not have been the first job offer I had in that period, but at the same time, it was what I thought the safest opportunity. And frankly, I was still paid by the NHS, so I could tell my dad I was still a doctor. So paid by Guys and Thompson's Hospital. So
yeah, you've got to manage your stakeholders.
My paycheck literally said Guys and Thompson's Hospital on it. So chilling.
Yeah. And then so you joined Digital Health London Accelerator, but then you became the director. So, how was that rise for you?
It was really interesting. So again, I haven't told this story before, but one thing that I got very early on was a compliment from my boss, Jenny Thomas, who works with Tara Donnelly and stuff now, doing some cool stuff in consultancy for bigger digital health companies, I think. But Jenny pulled me aside one day and just told me how well I was doing very early, first couple of weeks in, just said, "You're doing really well." And the things that she said I was doing really well, it's really funny, were just all the basics. I don't want to say the basics, because basics, I don't know, undersell. The fundamentals that I would expect from anyone in any job is what got called out. You're always on time. You dress well, like you dress respectfully. You've always got an agenda for the meetings. You always give everyone an agenda for the meetings. You summarize everything and give like all these things that were just like, I would consider them would consider them the basics. I'll use the word. Like, I would just consider, but that's what got cited as like, in the first couple of weeks, like, you've impressed because you've done these things. You're always on time. Like, you're always early. You're always like all of that. And that's the thing. It gets noticed. And so I think from there, I was sort of anchored in being like, okay, this guy, at least he sort of knows what he's doing. But then to be honest, I've always been quite consistent, I guess. Like, I've always just tried hard, tried to learn, tried to do the next thing. And look, I made mistakes, and I think I overplayed my hand a few times, and certainly overreaching and trying to get leadership opportunities and that sort of thing. But I was keen, and I did end up learning a lot. And and when the director role came up, we interviewed a lot of people that could have been directors, but they ended up choosing Hannah and I to job share the role because we already knew the organization, we knew what we were doing. We interviewed for it together as a job share, and we got the job. So that's how we became. And it was replacing Jenny Thomas as well. So it was like our official title. It's hilarious, this mate. Our official title was like, was it interim co-director of the digital but of course on LinkedIn it says director around the whole thing, of course. But no, we were interim co-directors of the Digital Health London Accelerator because Jenny was on maternity leave. But yeah, great job, great role, learned a lot. And again, like it was funded by European Union and the HSNs in London, then now the HINs, the Health Innovation Network. So again, like a bit of that back end of healthcare stuff, understanding how it all works, how you get funding for it, and all that side of things. It was very interesting, very cool role.
And then you did something quite interesting, which was you decided to start your own accelerator. How did that come about?
How did it come about? Well, when I joined Digital Health London, I had 4 PDFs on my desktop as files. That one of them was like how to build an accelerator, one was how to run an accelerator, one was how to fund an accelerator, and one was something else. Nowadays, you would just ChatGPT these things, but these were 4 PDFs that were written by people that had done this in different sectors and broke it all down for me. So I'd read those and I understood those before I even went into Digital Health London. So, or as I was going into it, because it became like, okay, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to think about my career. And I think in part, in a career, I think you do have to be selfish to some extent. You do have to look after yourself. Of course, you need organizational loyalty. Of course, you do your job. And for me, of course, you go the extra mile. Like all of that stuff is given. Any extra you've got left over in the tank, you got to look after yourself and think ahead. So that's what I was doing. I was going, well, if I'm joining this, I'm going to learn the business. I'm going to learn how this works as a business. And then I'm potentially going to employ this later in what I want to do. So it was engineered to some extent that the learning opportunities I created for myself in that job were finding out how certain things were done in order for me to be able to set it up myself. And that's not to say I was looking to set up a competitor, because that's not how this emerged. What actually happened was, after doing the job for a couple of years, I went to my boss. In fact, I went to Tara, who was CEO of the organization at the time, and just said, like, this is what I want to do. This is how I want to do it. And the idea was that it would be an earlier stage accelerator than what it was at Digital Health London, because you had to have a product for Digital Health London. You had to be able to scale to some extent, and then beyond Digital Health London, you would go on to the NIA, and the NIA would then scale you nationally. So that was kind of like the flow, but there was nothing at the first stage. There was nothing. And the idea originally was entrepreneur first for health tech. Let's find talented people. Let's put them together as co-founders. Let's hear their ideas, and let's help them by getting all of the knowledge that I've accumulated, and Alex, who I did this with, entrepreneur, trauma orthopedic surgeon, built a few businesses, exited one, like he knew the business side, I knew the healthcare side broadly. That's kind of how it worked. Let's get all the information that these people need on day one that they start a business, and we can fix the problem of a lack of ideas reaching market. And then once they reach market, then Digital Health London comes in. So we were filling out the ecosystem in what we tried to do. And that's what we did. We went to, we pitched at this pitch competition. It was just like a startup pitch competition. And it was a bit weird because it wasn't like a tech startup. We were pitching an accelerator. But we came second in this pitch competition. And the people running the pitch just gave us money anyway. So that gave us like a bit to start, and then they invested in us. And I think we raised like $250,000, something along those lines, from an insurance company who broadly, they just wanted first dibs on investing in the startups. And they actually just wanted some of Alex and I's time to like give them advice on a few different bits of bobs, and it was actually easy for them to just invest in this accelerator that we're doing, and we'll just take a small salary. So we'll put all that, so it was like it was a bit scrappy, like the way that we did it. But it did really well. Like we ran like 4 cohorts of it. We did it on a convertible note, so which means that essentially it's like a promise to on both sides to invest and to raise money later down the line. So these are sort of paper deals that you would do. So we had a couple of those converting people that did £1 million rounds. And yeah, we took a little bit of equity in those startups and we ran an accelerator. It was great. But the idea of that was always to raise a fund. The idea was always to, the thing that fixes early stage health tech in the UK is an early stage health tech fund that knows SEI, CIS investing to the point where it invests in the right things that actually hit market and do well, which then provides confidence and then helps with innovation more and more and more. That's the flywheel that we wanted to start. So we went to the British Business Bank, who ran a program at the time that said, if you come to us with a good fund idea, we'll invest 60% of it. You need to go and raise the other 40. So we did that. We had an idea for a 40 mil health tech fund. We got 24 million, not quite over the line with the British Business Bank because we needed to do a few bits and bobs, but a verbal commitment that that's kind of the route that they were going down. And then we set about trying to raise the rest of the fund. We raised some of it. I think we raised another 6, but then COVID hit. Cornerstone pulls out, blah, 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 blah. Like it all seemed, and it takes about 3 years to raise a fund anyway, because as first-time fund managers, it's very, very, very difficult to do. And Alex and I, to be perfectly honest, fell out of love with the idea anyway. And we did a podcast on this, which sits somewhere in the million health tech podcasts I've done.
I remember
we talked about this, yeah. And it was one of those things where I think for me personally, I'd have become a venture capitalist that had never built a business. And first of all, it didn't feel right. And I like to do things off the back of credibility and do things right. So that didn't make sense. That said, though, if I'd have raised a fund in 5 minutes and just got a 40 mil health tech fund, like I wouldn't have said no. But at the same time, I think these frictions and these things that happen and the COVID, like all that sort of stuff. I also, my half brother passed away as well, and like I ended up taking a serious look at how I spent my time because he died young, and yeah, I took a serious look at how I spent my time, and the long and short of it is it wasn't becoming a VC. That's not what I wanted to do. And I already had the idea for SomX at that point anyway, and Jess and I had started doing a little bit of work on that and helping a few startups out with comms, marketing, Jess's side PR. We started doing that with a few people on a freelance basis, contractor basis kind of thing, which was sort of proving the model is kind of what we were doing initially. And that just looked like if we pressed the pedal down, we could build a serious cash generating, revenue based business. So like that's what we ended up going with, and that's kind of how that whole thing played out.
And you mentioned SomX now, which I'd love to explore a bit more. And what I find really interesting about it is that it's a business that you started with your wife.
Yeah.
So can you walk me through how, I guess you've explained how the idea came about, but what was it like building out that business from the point of inception to present day?
Yeah, good question. There's a few different ways that I could answer this, but I think the bit that would be most useful to your listeners would be the real kind of practical elements to it. So what was quite empowering about running the accelerator, like running Digital Health London, is that one of the things that I learned was once you put a contract in place, this sounds really niche and weird, but like once you put a contract in place, you can then do a thing. And that sounds really kind of, I don't know, glib and weird, but let me explain. I could never understand how you started a business. A business was very nebulous to me. I didn't know what a business really was. What happens in an office? Like what is all of this? All a business really is when you boil it right down, in my mind at the time anyway, was an agreement that I do this thing and you do this thing. And then you need a business bank account that when you do the thing, the other person puts money in that bank account. And that broadly is a business, an agreement and a bank account that receives money. Like, once I'd figured that out, I was free, mate. I had freedom. I had utter freedom. You know, you set up a limited company online, HMRC, 20 quid. Cool. You attach the business bank account to the limited company, online process through Tide. Easy. Now I'm free. Now I can make an agreement with someone to do a thing, and they pay money for that thing into that account, into that business account. That's it. And you file your accounts once a year. And if you don't know how to do that, you can just ChatGPT it now. I would recommend getting an accountant, though, to stay out of tax jail. You don't want to be in tax jail. So that's the only thing there. But to be honest, dude, like that, like I'm being like really like clear here. Like that's once I realized that, I just felt this absolute freedom to do whatever the heck that I wanted. And so when Alex and I were running the accelerator, we decided, hey, this has been a good ride. We've both learnt loads. Our networks have massively increased. We've done all this stuff. Alex wanted to go and do his VR business, Verti. He wanted to do Shiken, which is his education one. Alex and I actually caught up last weekend, which was really nice. So he wanted to go and do those things. I wanted to go and do SomX, and we just had a really nice conversation. It was just like, yo, I think we're at the end of this road, but we've got plenty of cool roads to go down. Like, should we just go and do it? Like, yeah, cool. We'll see you in 10 years, and we'll probably do the fun then when we're a bit more credible. So that was really nice. But I think, yeah, then it was a case of, okay, what am I good at? What do I like? And broadly, mate, when I was running the accelerators, they all had the same problem. Generic marketing agency, doesn't understand health tech, not their fault, but it's very binary. And so actually, really simply, if I put the feelers out, say to people, I'll write your LinkedIn and do your LinkedIn, Jess will do your press releases. And that is a very boiled down way of approaching a comms plan, which is content and PR. And then it's boiling those things down into just LinkedIn and press releases. There's obviously a lot more that goes on there. But I'll do your LinkedIn, Jess will do your press releases. Do you fancy doing that for $2,000 a month? Heck yeah. So launched with a few clients. And because I knew content as well at that time, so I had the podcast because we started when we did HS. I think I'd started HealthTech Pigeon, maybe it was a bit later, but it was I had a decent LinkedIn presence. I'd be doing that sort of stuff. So I knew content, and I knew that content was the future of modern marketing at the time. No one knew the term organic content then. It didn't mean anything, but I followed Gary Vaynerchuk and a few other people that I was essentially building like Vaynermedia for HealthTech at the time. Like, that was kind of in my mind, although they don't tend to do press and PR, but yeah, it's pretty simple. I'll do your content, just do PR, and that's how it started. And yeah, we just did like a client contract, and that was that. We did that with a lawyer, by the way, at the time. No ChatGPT. I would do it with ChatGPT now, and I would get a lawyer to check it. That's the workflow that I would do now, which would be cheaper. But you can go on seedlegals.com and you can put a shareholders agreement together with your co-founder. You can do these early contract things. You can, like, all of that stuff's amazing on Seed Legals. That's not an ad. I have no skin in that game, but I think it's just a great website. And that was the initial bit, dude. Like, once I had the contract and the bank account, that was it. Then it's just a promise and an agreement that you'll do things and get paid for them. And then it was thinking about, okay, now we've got this revenue. Cool. Can we pay ourselves a bit? Yeah, we can pay ourselves a bit. That's cool. And then we can keep some in there. That's cool as well. Then the next thing was a freelancer. So we were like, cool, well, we're sort of at capacity. Should we get a couple of freelancers? We didn't want to commit to a PAYE hire because that seemed a bit grand at the time. And this is 6 years ago. God, it's amazing how far you come in 6 years, isn't it? But yeah, we just thought, cool, we'll get 2 freelancers to come and do stuff. It's a bit more expensive for their time, but it gives us the freedom that we can, get rid if we need to. And of course, what happened was we brought the freelancers on. That freed us up to do more stuff. We could bring more clients on, and then it was like, cool, we can get some PAYE hires. And then we panicked about that, like, Googling, what if you need to let them go? What if your business shrinks and you have a PAYE hire? How do you define bankruptcy? Like, all this sort of stuff is like, I was always protecting downside. And actually, that was one of the reasons we didn't grow. We could have grown even quicker if we'd modeled a bit more upside, maybe. But yeah, that's kind of how it grew. But Jess and I, 100% shareholders. Like, we have a 10% options pool now, but for staff, but we own the whole business ourselves. We are bootstrapped, which means that it's very different as a business model to venture. We care so deeply about every hire. We do everything a lot more deliberately with a small team. And all that sort of stuff. Like, it's very, very different. That whilst I learned so many lessons from interviewing, at the time was probably 200 entrepreneurs before I started SomX. Interviewing 200 business owners before you start a business, you definitely want to do that if you can. That's kind of ideal.
That's some good customer discovery right there.
It really was. It really was. So I knew things about focus. I knew things about not getting distracted. I knew things about hiring being the most difficult thing to do. I knew so much. My eyes were open in so many ways that did allow for some just good principles of how we built SomX initially to sit on some good foundations. Of course, we were very good at our own marketing. We got a partnership with Google over the line very early on, which helped with brand and all these things. We just accepted and knew that the first 5 years is going to suck. Because that's the thing as well. Like, it's going to take a bootstrap business 5 years to figure out what it's doing. Like, it just is. I think I heard that on the Alex Hormozy video as well the other day, at least the 5 years thing. But it's kind of true that it has taken that long for us to kind of figure out what on earth we're doing to some extent. And I mean, building a business. I think the other thing is as well, like, we never had too many concerns about the quality of the product. When you're early, you make a lot of mistakes, by the way, and you lose clients because you make those mistakes. That is also a fact. And that's hard lessons that you do have to learn, especially when you're trying to grow and scale and outsource yourself. You give responsibility to other people and things mess up because you haven't checked, and you're figuring out quality control and all those things. That you're going to make mistakes doing that stuff. But yeah, I learned a lot before we started SomX to build it on good foundations. And then, of course, every single day, every single month of SomX, I've never run a business that size before because we're growing. So, of course, there's new challenges all the time. But I just try and stay up to date on the podcasts that I listen to, the people that I speak to, and, catching up with people like yourself to steal your wisdom. And yeah, just try and do a good... honestly, I just try and turn up every day and do a good job. And by virtue of that, SomX is growing. I like that, and that's enough for us. But yeah.
Running out of time now, so I've got a last question for you. I guess throughout this entire journey, you've seen a lot, you've done a lot. What kind of advice would you give to other clinicians that are looking to explore alternative paths, try something different? What would you say to them?
You can't have it all, and that really explore, are you being pushed out? And if so, that's fine. But are you being pulled in to something else? And to make sure that you do the work to find what will pull you in, because it's stormy out there. But, and they say any port in a storm, right? That I don't think that's necessarily true in the way that people move into health tech stuff, because I think you can end up taking a management consultancy job and just hating that as well, because you're trying to equalize the salary and that makes you feel good, but you're working now more hours, more difficult. You've got insecurity in your job because you're on a probation period that you might not now pass. And by the way, I've seen all this, these are real examples. So I think doing the work to figure out if it's health tech, what's a technology that I like and what's a clinical area that I like? What are the startups in that zone? So if it's women's health and epigenetics, you go and speak to Dharma Health, and you go and speak to, you know, a load of the others, and then you start getting an idea for what it's like there. And the other side is, I think, figuring out of yourself what you like and what you're good at. Because I think in medicine, we hear a lot that it, you know, drills a lot of the things out of you and you're not sure what your transferable skills are. I think, again, do the work to figure those things out. So for myself, that was realizing that my hobbies were very creative. So I was into music, I was into design, I was into videography, I was into photography, I was into all these very creative pursuits. And it was like, hold on a minute, if I design my own life and career, I can make that part of it. And actually, that, you know, that's where marketing lives. And I realized I was always very good at marketing myself. I always had a LinkedIn, from 2011, 2012, I had a LinkedIn profile that I kept up to date and all that sort of stuff. So I clearly liked that side of the world, but I'd never joined the dots. I didn't know what marketing was, frankly, as a doctor. So it's doing the work to find out those things and where those things marry up, and then seeking opportunity there would be my major advice, because I think gone are the days where being a doctor is a differentiator when looking for a role outside of medicine. I think that was the case 10, 15 years ago.
Mm.
It was novel to be a doctor looking for a job in private equity. I don't think that's the case now. I think it's far, far more common. So I think it's, but also the opportunity is more. So as a doctor, you can become a product manager, you can become a VC associate, you can become, like, there's all these different things now. And HealthTech itself has an infrastructure to it. There are jobs within HealthTech that are, you know, just normal jobs that respect the fact you're a doctor as well. So there's lots more opportunity. It's just not novel to be a doctor anymore. So it really is about finding out what you like and what you're good at. And then what is the infrastructure around those things that you can start to find a way to slot yourself in. I think doing the work to do that and not allowing yourself to just be pushed out and take any port in a storm is probably my advice. I will caveat that, though, with that if it's just so bad and you just want to get experience out in the workplace doing literally anything, then by all means, like, please don't let me stop you, because in some ways I think, you know, actually leaving medicine to go and do the thing is a heck of an achievement. So any way that you can get that done is impressive, and you should be proud of yourself if you've managed to do it. But I think you'll front load a lot of potential career moves down the line, and effort maybe, and disappointment maybe, because you're not getting the jobs because people aren't seeing it in your CV, if you do that work up front to figure out where you're best.
Brilliant. So that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for joining me today, James.
You're very welcome.
And for those listening, if you like what you hear and want to support the show, please do like and subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or whatever podcast platform you're currently listening to us on. It would mean a lot to me, and it would help spread the message to others exploring alternative paths. Thanks for joining us, and see you next time. Bye-bye.